Hi American Studies, Miss Hammond here. We're back again to do our first podcast. Today we're going to be talking about academic tone and levels of formality. When you're thinking about academic tone and levels of formality, the best way to describe it is that attitude that you have behind your writing. So, if somebody's being very depressing in their writing, it's going to sound totally different than someone who's trying to sound upbeat or professional. The tone and levels of formality behind your writing are important because they set the foundation for the rest of your writing skills. So, get your note-taking guide out and be ready to do some writing, some practice, and also have some fun. So, let's do a quick introduction to tone. For each of the following people, there will be 4 people. Write down what you think they're feeling. Here we go. Person 1. What's that guy feeling? Person 1. Go ahead and write down some emotions. What's he like? Here we go. Let's do person 2. What's she feeling? What's this person feeling right now? Person 3. Write down some adjectives for person 3. What's he feeling? What's this guy like? And person 4. What's this girl like? What's she feeling? So when you've written down some descriptors or some words to just describe how these people are feeling, go ahead and follow along in the podcast. So for each of the pictures that we just looked at, I want you to think about how you figured out what they were feeling. I'll give you some options here. Did you take a look at facial expressions? So maybe what they were doing with their face. Were they laughing? Were they frowning? That's how 99% of our attitude kind of receptors work. It's basically what we see people doing with their face. So if you saw something in their face, go ahead and write that down. Was it body position? Maybe how they were standing? Was there something in common between the people who had negative emotions and the people who had positive emotions? Try to compare that. The other thing is, compare clothing and makeup. Maybe that was how you saw the difference. What did those people have in common? For the people with negative emotions, were they wearing similar clothing? Tell me a little bit about that. The reason why I introduced this idea, kind of trying to describe people and their emotions, is that the attitude that each person shows can kind of be called their tone. And so that's kind of an introduction as to what tone is in writing. If you look at each of those people as a piece of writing, then you can start to look at some different ways that they might be expressing themselves. For example, if you start getting a piece of writing that's very angry, well, it's going to become clear to us as we're reading, as we're writing, that that's what the author's feeling. It's just like a picture. Let's talk about what tone is. So, the definition of tone is the author's attitude toward the work. So when somebody's writing and they're feeling some emotions towards the work, that can be considered tone. The other part of it is the author's feelings towards the reader. For example, if you wrote a letter to your ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend, you're probably going to take a different tone than if you are writing a letter to your grandma. That tone is the attitude or the feeling towards whoever is receiving the work or the work itself. So that attitude is kind of what's behind what you're feeling or what another author is feeling while they're producing the work. Imagine that each work has its own color. So for example, maybe for anger it's red. That tone is very, very vibrant. It's going to be very powerful. And the tone represents, the color represents the tone of the piece. Maybe for happy for you, that means purple. These tones are just like colors, and as we start to read more complex pieces, I need you to be able to visualize what was the author feeling when he or she wrote this. The next part is just talking about writing in general. All writing has a tone. Every single thing that we read, everything we pick up has a tone in it. And as humans, we pick up on that tone in a bunch of different ways. Just like when you were looking at the photos, you pick up on their emotions, their attitude and tone in different ways. We do that too when we're reading. Let's talk about the 3 ways that we do that in our reading and writing. The first way that we develop tone in our reading and writing is through word choice. Word choice is basically how words are selected, so the kinds of vocabulary that go into your writing. The reality is that most words have some kind of emotion behind them, either positive or negative. The fact that words have emotion behind them, we call that connotation. We talked about that in class a little bit, and so let's review. So, most words are either positive or negative, but we also have some words that fall in the middle and are neutral. Take a look at this little spectrum that I made here. On the left, we have some positive words, words that have positive connotations. In the middle, these are words that really don't have a connotation, they're neutral. And to the right, we have words with negative connotations. Those are bad connotations. Let's look at an example from class. So, we've just finished talking about captains of industry. That's a positive connotation. A captain is somebody who's a leader. Industry, good work, things are getting done. A neutral word for this would be industrialists. They had businesses, they existed during industrialization, it's kind of a fact. A negative connotation would be robber barons. The reason why that's negative, we're looking at the word robber. They're robbing somebody, and it's the poor. The important thing is that when you are trying to set a specific tone, you need to pick the right words that actually convey the attitude that you want. For example, if you were trying to make friends with Andrew Carnegie, you probably wouldn't go up to him and say, "Hey, what's up, robber baron?" Probably not going to say that, because that has a negative connotation. You have to pick the right kinds of words so that your attitude comes across in the way that you want it to. The second part of setting the tone is your use of punctuation. Punctuation is all those little dots and dashes and quotation marks, all those little things other than letters that go into sentences. So, punctuation is important because it kind of determines how your tone comes across. In some writing, punctuation is more formal than in other kinds of writing. Let me give you some examples here. Think about the punctuation in your writing for the following situations. Do a little comparison here. So, your first option is you're texting a friend. Your second option is you're writing a thank you letter to your grandma. In your texting, you're probably going to not use perfect punctuation, especially if you have autocorrect. You just fly through, send out that text, it has information in there. But if you're writing a letter to grandma, it's going to confuse her if you write it in the same way that you're texting. Typically, punctuation is a way to differentiate those types of writing. See another example. Here, maybe you're applying for a job. It's important to have good punctuation when you're applying for a job, but is it life or death? Probably not. A more important situation for you to have good punctuation is if you are applying for parole. If you're trying to get out of jail, it's important for you to set a good image. Punctuation can help you do that. And the formal kinds of punctuation, that means the more seriously you take the punctuation, the better you will probably do in that situation. Let's look at one more. So, let's pretend you're asking your dad for $5. Yeah, you're borrowing money, but is it that big of a deal? Punctuation probably doesn't matter that much. But think about in 25 or 30 years when you're asking a bank for a mortgage. You're going to be buying a house. You need to show them that you're credible. You need to show them that you take things seriously. So your punctuation is going to count more. The important thing is that you need to know when punctuation counts. If you're writing a very important paper, punctuation is going to count more than just when you're taking notes in class. So we need to start developing those levels of formality, which basically mean when you're going to have to take your writing more seriously. The third part of setting tone involves your sources. So, sources are the information, the different entities that help back you up. And they can either help or hurt your tone. Okay? They can either make you sound very credible, trustworthy, honest, on top of it, or they can make you sound really, really silly. They can make you sound like you have no idea what you're talking about. Let's chat some more about these. So, the important thing with sources is that we need to understand who is standing behind your information. If it's just some random dude, you may not be very credible. A more formal type of source that's going to increase your level of formality, they include things like experts or witnesses or scholars, people who know the subject and can back the facts up. So, if you are looking to take a more academic tone, taking things a little bit more seriously, we need more credible sources. So, quickly, I want you to just put the people, the companies, institutions in order according to their credibility. Go ahead and do that in your note-taking guide. If you need more time, go ahead, just pause the podcast. No biggie. So, let's chat quickly about levels of formality. Again, I'll use the definition. It's the kind of stuff that you take seriously and the level to which you take it to the level to which you take it seriously. Aside from tone, writers also use these levels of formality. Let me talk to you a little bit about these. So, low formality is when the writer is just having fun. The writer's chilling out, they're easygoing, a lot of cartoons, comics, they're lighthearted. These are low formality, they're not supposed to be very high stakes or serious or official. Medium formality is the writer is taking care of business. All right, the writer's getting stuff done, they have a reputation, but it's not necessarily life or death. Kind of medium formality, medium seriousness. For high formality, the writer is extremely serious. These are occasions like official government visits, dignitaries, high school graduations or college graduations, a wedding. In low formality, you're just running around and having fun. That's kind of like the reception at the wedding. High formality is when the people are actually taking the vows, taking things very seriously. Everyone's quiet and very respectful. So the different levels of formality are going to affect how you write. Let's chat about what this looks like for your writing. So, when you're in class and you're just writing something for Miss Hammond or Miss Bradley, your writing should be medium formality. You're getting down to business, you're getting stuff done. You're not writing like you text, right? You actually have some good punctuation in there. Your day-to-day class writing should be that medium, right in the middle formality. Big papers and projects should be more formal. I'm talking you're serious, you've read over it a number of times, you're taking it seriously, but on the other hand, your personal notes can be less formal. That's probably going to look like low formality. Maybe you're drawing a picture, your friend next to you writes you a little note or gives you a smiley face. That's going to be less formal. let's compare these three. So we have low formality over on the left, we have medium formality in the middle, and high formality in the right. While I talk about these, go ahead and take notes on these in your note-taking guide. Fill them in for each. So in low formality, we start out with word choice. Word choice is super casual and fun. There's lots of jokes, lots of fun, easy words, maybe cultural references. It's very easy language. In medium formality, your word choice is going to give us some information. You'll give us facts. You'll tell us about how things run. You're going to explain to us your thoughts. In high formality, word choice is going to be very descriptive. So you're not only telling us about what happened, but how these things happen, going into detail, being very, very serious in your explanations. In low formality, your punctuation is generally going to be sloppy or absent. Think back to the text message example. You're probably not going to go in and put perfect quotation marks every single time, but that's okay. You don't need to for that audience. For medium formality, your punctuation should be almost perfect. Maybe a couple of errors here and there, but definitely not as sloppy as low formality. These are situations where you care about your grade, you care about business, you care about what you're communicating. The important thing is that you're paying attention and really being cognizant. That means being aware of what your writing looks like. For high formality, punctuation cannot have any errors. This has to be a perfect text. And punctuation is taken to the next level where it's very important and it conveys your skills. High formality, these are things like ACT, SAT, huge capstone project, big papers that you'll turn in. This is where high formality writing comes in. Let's chat about sources. In low formality, this is when you're chatting with your friends, you're hanging out with people. Your sources don't have to be credible. They can be completely random. You can use Family Guy as a source. You can use Saturday Night Live. You can use whatever you want as a source because you're just making jokes and hanging out. In medium formality, your sources should be credible and trustworthy. So it can't be random hobo Bob on the corner. It has to be somebody who actually knows what they're talking about. For high formality, sources should be the experts on the topic, and they should be super official. This is where things like books on the topic will show up, using an encyclopedia, using scholarly articles that we find online. These sources need to be extremely credible and never wrong. You should be able to go back to them and really lay a good foundation of your reasoning on these types of sources. These are the kinds of sources that we look at when we're writing really important papers or very in-depth analysis types of activities. So, let's kind of wrap this up. Let's chat about some last thoughts for your reading and writing. Almost all writing skills come back to this idea of tone and formality. As you're writing, you'll have to start making decisions about the words that you'll use, how you use punctuation, who you'll reference, what kind of writing you need to be achieving. If you stay at that low level of formality, it's going to be hard to take you seriously as a student. The more academic you can start to sound, the better off you will be, especially as you progress through high school. The important thing to realize is that all of the grammar that we work on, all of your reading, all of your writing, they all kind of lead back to the type of reading and writing in front of you. If I ask you to write a paper, I'm going to expect high formality. If I ask you to write a text message conversation, I'm going to expect low formality. When we think about the kinds of reading and writing that we're experiencing, we have to keep these types of formality in the back of our minds. The important thing is just to keep practicing as well. this type of learning doesn't end after freshman year. I'm working on my master's degree and I still focus on how to make my writing sound more academic, more credible, higher level of formality. Who do I cite? What is my punctuation like? The important thing is just to continue practicing, keep on learning, and eventually it will come. You're going to be great writers, and I'm really not worried about you. Just make sure that you keep practicing. That's the most important thing. Any questions? If you have any questions for me, please feel free to write them down. And of course, watch the podcast again if something didn't make sense. See you in class.